feature basically unchanged, slightly higher carry rates. So this USDA number, we've made 6 consecutive lower closes in corn since these numbers were released. This is just the thing we're trading. Without a weather problem, this is kind of what we're looking at. So I want to talk about, just the big picture supply and demand stuff. This chart shows U.S. grain stocks, stocks of corn, beans, and wheat combined, versus acreage of corn, beans, and wheat. And my point in this is that you can see what the market does, how it responds. Since ethanol, we all of a sudden saw, stocks started to decline. What did acreage start to do? Stocks started to decline. What did acreage start to do? Well, now stocks are at all-time record highs. What are acres needing to do? But just like any well-established economy or any kind of market out there, it doesn't matter if it's commodities or anything, you have periods of oversupply, and you have periods of demand exceeding supply, where stocks are starting to run thin. Right now, we're just in the wrong side of that cycle. It'll happen, something will change, and what is going to be the thing that changes? Right now, I can say that over the next 2 years, the market is trying to put some acres out of production. That's really what the market needs. One of two things to happen: weather problem, fewer acres. One of those two pieces has to happen. So it's doing its best to kind of try and get some acres out of production. It really is. This is a chart from Daily, and I like it, so I didn't want to reproduce it. I just thought I'll put it up there. But I think this is a good look. This really illustrates what I was trying to show. What this shows is revenue per acre versus cost per acre. What they've got, this isn't anything different than what any other economist is going to use. It's basically flat line revenue per acre going forward. How do we get back on track is, at some point you're going to have costs come down, or you're going to have revenue go up. But I think this just illustrates the point we are. We're in a potentially multi-year cycle where it's a little upside down right now. Here's an interesting thing, though. What's happening in corn and beans on everybody's going to have different cost of production. This is simply just a quick snapshot look. We've got corn and beans basically kind of neck and neck. But there's one that's catching my eye. CRP. CRP is all of a sudden a viable alternative. I don't want anybody to raise their hand, but is anyone in this room thinking about that? You can't raise your hand. Because somebody is. Because there's active CRP acre change from a year ago in the state of Iowa, county by county. Those counties on the right are counties you probably know very well. We're talking about the scale is in 1,000 acres. That's 11,000 acres. Woodbury is the top one. The highest producing ground in Iowa is the one that's going into CRP. A year after we just had a record yield in almost every one of those counties. Does that tell you the situation right now? It really does. I think that's probably one of the best illustrations. Now, the CRP program is obviously capped. So it's not like we're going to see 10 million CRP acres this year because everyone's going to flock to it. But the point is that based on what we know today, we see producers actively looking at ways to lower costs, potentially generate profits on own ground. This is an alternative. This is certainly something that people are doing. And I'll bet when the Fed numbers come out, they may be out today actually, we'll even see a bigger change in a lot of these companies. All right, everybody ready to go blind? Look at that chart for a little bit. This chart is one of those takeaway charts. All right, when you leave here, remember this. This is Deese corn every year since 2000. The blue line represents $4.50. Where's everyone's marketing start? $5? Is that the price we start marketing? Look at $4.50. How many years do we see $4.50, above $4.50 prices at harvest? 3 years. Which years were those? 10, 11, and 12. 3 consecutive years we saw. And what did that do to everybody in this room? What did we start waiting for? $5 corn. It was easy. That's the way to do it. I could lower that blue line to 430 and still ask the same question. How many years have we been above 430 in harvest? Or in exploration? 3 years. The black line you can kind of see is a little heavier than the others. That's last year. Got right to 450. In June, July of last year, we saw these futures trade to 450. And then it fell out of bed when we realized crop problem, crisis averted. We don't have a problem without it. What's the point of all this is that when you think about the marketing situation this year, I want you to think about that what I just gave you. Now, this market's going to have, if we're in trading range, we're in a rut right now, really. But what could change? I want you to look at this long-term monthly corn chart. So I can see 3 distinct ranges in there. We've got the old, this is the archaic. You know, we're not talking about a $2 corn environment anymore. Even with the stuff I've thrown out here, we're not talking about $2 futures. We are talking about, even in history with ethanol, with demand growth, we've seen plenty of years where you've had $3 lows. You've seen some spikes below $3. That's not, impossible to see something like that happen. And your peaks, 450 is kind of catching your peaks in these big supply years. Does that range sound familiar? Does it sound like the last 2 years, basically? We're down in this area right now. I can't guarantee you won't spike below some of that support point. I can't guarantee you won't spike above some of the resistance areas. But what I do think is that given the current supply and demand environment, we're going to spend a lot of time in that kind of range. So make sure your marketing plan fits that kind of range. Make sure you're not getting bullish up here. When you get up above 420, that's nearby futures, so it's not D's necessarily. But when you start to see new crop corn, it doesn't matter if it's D16, it doesn't matter if it's D17. If we're in this multi-year cycle, you've got to be thinking about multi-years. Okay, so that's where you've got that range. Beans, similar thing. Still, like I said at the beginning, corn more important than beans, but this is kind of where you've seen some of these big stocks being in the environment trade. All right, so I've given you all this. Now let's talk about what could change. This is how I'm going to end it because, I've been a show stealer here so far. Everybody got a smile on their face. But let's talk about what can make me wrong. What can make me wrong? What would be something that, and I'm glad I don't have to give the weather out because that's a lot more, that's a bigger piece to the equation here. That's the only hope right now. That's really the only wild card we have this year is weather. So I want to talk about what could happen given a potential weather scare. Let's talk about it 2 ways. What could happen given a real weather scare, and what could happen given a phantom weather scare, something the market thinks is happening, but doesn't really happen. Like last year, remember? We rallied 450 before realizing there was a problem. So what's interesting is this is a seasonality of corn, decent corn futures from January all the way through first notice. This is 2010, 11, and 12 combined. Rally starts in June. Houston, we have a problem. Rally. The other years, the non-event years, all the way back, this is from 2000 forward, you put your highs almost always in Jan, Feb, March, right? And then you slowly erode when you realize it wasn't a weather premium or weather problem. This is the same basic concept, except it takes it's an ethanol environment, 2007 forward, minus the weather problem, these crop problems. When are your peaks seasonally? Sure. And why do I think that is? With the bigger demand base, we have less room for error. The market's more responsive to weather problems, perceived, imaginary, or real, whatever it is. They are more sensitive to weather scares. Use that to your advantage this year. Use weather scares as a reason to sell. Because it's very uncommon to make lows in February and March. This year is clearly, we see the market is trading these large world stocks. It's uncommon to see that. There again, beans, same concept, June highs. So, market perceives weather, what happens? Who are the biggest players of price driving out there? Biggest mover of price is the funds. They hold the most buying power. Why do they hold the most buying power? Because they're short almost record levels of corn, beans, and wheat right now. The biggest short they ever had was 1 year ago. Last year, that's why we got to 450. That's why we got almost a dollar value off the lows, because the funds were short covered. Same concept. This was a year ago. And, oh, by the way, this chart shows price of TBOT corn futures versus spec position. Net long, net short. Here we are today. Let's throw out a little scenario. Weather problem starts to be, are the stakes high? How many people have heard about the El Nino versus La Nina? Is that a thing we're waiting on right now? That change to develop? Stakes are high this year, I think. You know, I think you're going to get a lot more weather information here in a little bit. Let's just have a little bit of a weather problem. Funds cover shorts, perhaps build it long. That's your opportunity. That's not the time to get married to 450 corn. That's the time to be marketing into that market. Why is that? This is a balance sheet with some weather potential problems, okay? This is what we could be facing. This is my balance sheet projection based on 90 million corn acres, the 168 yield the USDA is using, my demand-based projections give us next fall 2.1 billion bushels of corn. With a 4% reduction in trend, you still get 1.6 billion bushels of corn. So 4% reduction in trend, 4% below trend, or what they're using as trend, still gives us 1.6 billion bushels. That's not bullish at $4. It's probably $3.50 to $4, a lot of the same range we've been seeing. 8% below trend might start to get us thinking about things. That's probably a north of $4 type of market. What I've illustrated here is the time that those two occurrences take place. A 4% below trend yield happens basically since 1990, 12% of the time. And 8% below trend happens 12% of the time. And while the theme of this day is risk management, you can get better odds right out the door one of these directions than you can on betting that you're going to have 8% below trend yield this year. So my point is, market bring when the market perceives the worst is going to happen. Because there's a 77% chance neither one of those two things happens. Okay? Beans, same thing. Same thing. And ironically, the beans still end up with a decent carryout, even with an 8% below trend yield. That's the situation we've got in beans. In any case, we have the stage set for a potential weather-led rally, spec short covering led rally. Just make sure you're not getting bullish at the top of this. Quickly take home points. What I try to do here is illustrate the importance and timing of these market impacts. Bullish scenarios, bearish scenarios, short-term scenarios, long-term scenarios. Size of the bubble is how important it is to the market. You can see what we talked about all day today. Funds short position in the 2016 growing season are our only two bullish factors. And both of them are not facts, they are possibilities. Neither one of them has to happen. The rest of these things are facts. Okay? Same situation on beans. So take home points. I really can't illustrate it enough because the markets are saying this is a tough time. We will come out of it, and I'll bet you there'll be a response. We need to bring back production in a big way. I just don't know when that is. We're currently in that oversupply cycle. And I talked about one of two things needs to happen today to get the carryouts lower. It's either got to be an acres or a yield gain, and then risk management. This day, you've got a lot of people here that want to help manage risk, and we'd all be better off if we had higher prices, but this is the market we're in, and prudent risk management is very essential. So that's all I've got. I have one more slide. Last bar side. The other two have been going over so well. So Mr. Osborne, we got excused. My brain is full. Your brain's full now. You got several more hours. All right, that's all I've got. Anyone else have a minute or two for a question?
I've got a question. Do you see the government getting into like a PIC program again? Something's going to happen here if we have another record deal.
You could see, are you trying to say gas grain prices go back below a long level, basically?
If you have another record deal,
It could happen. No, I don't think that that's a likely reason. To me, and I know this is strange, but the one thing it could do, I just hope they stay out, personally. That's never going to be good for anybody. They get into something like that, and what does it do? You end up actually trying to bring production back, right? And I don't think that's what we need. That's not the way to solve the problem. But I hope the government doesn't get involved with anything. It'll sort itself out and just let the market do its job.
what about the chances of opening up that CRP? I mean, they're paying record prices. About opening it up that more.
I was going to say that, and I could easily see that being the angle they go at to try and solve the problem. To me, that would be the more likely of the two scenarios playing out. The government intervenes. Again, I'm not a government guy, but that would be the more likely play. That's a good question. Anybody else have a question?
And Matt, your long-term, short-term, second, third end slide, what's long-term? Is that 12 months?
Yeah, I want to call it the cycle could be an 18-month, the next two growing seasons. So that's why when I said, if you start to see D17 corn get into that 425 in the north area, you've got to make sure we're taking advantage of that. I know it doesn't sound real exciting, 425 corn, but I think that this cycle is multi-year. Without a weather problem this year, next year, if I'm invited back, I'll give you the same presentations. I mean, that's the problem. We're in that cycle right now. So make sure, we're looking at the right risk management things. 425 corn isn't going to be a bad sale, especially if it's your first sale. We always want the first sale to be the worst sale. So yeah, Jan, that's probably, I'd say, the next 18 months, 2 growing seasons.
Crop insurance spring price on corn, I think 386 and beans 85. What kind of a guess do you have for a fall price?
Well, you're going the right direction with this line of question. Because the crop insurance prices where the break-even levels are way down right now, right? In terms of revenue. Fall price, given a normal yield or a trend line yield, I think futures could dip below $3. I don't think they're going to go much below that, but I think they could. They got to 318 2 years ago with a smaller balance sheet than we could have this year with a normal weather. Bean futures, I think the ratio is going to stay the same. You could see beans to corn. Beans could be twice as much as corn. That's probably what I'd like to look at. So corn's maybe 2.2 times. So if you're talking about $3 corn futures, you're probably in the 7s on beans in an ideal growing season situation.
Ideal or average?
Trend line or above yields. So good, not great. Just good weather, not great. Any other questions? All right, well, thanks a lot, appreciate it. Yesterday, someone asked a question about how boring the market has been. Jan said, "This is an interesting thing. We've seen nearby corn futures essentially trade since that started the trend in 2014. Have been within about a 40-cent trading range for 18 months. We've seen a few peaks above, a few peaks below. We're talking about basically 9 weeks have been outside of that 40-cent range. We're just coiling. We're trying to find that perfect zone. And again, 3 cent higher, you're talking about nearby futures at $4. $4 at 360 is where we're seeing so much of futures action taking place. $4 plus 25-cent carry to new crop is $4.25 corn. Does that fit with whatever I've been talking about? So that's just the last comment I'll make. So straight to the upper limit.
I just have one more question.
Yeah.
Looks like it's gonna be Trump versus Clinton. Which one do you favor? I mean, which one's gonna help the farmer?
Yeah. I don't think either one,
Right.
yeah, I don't think that's a question. The cruise question got asked yesterday though, so.
Hey, guys, we're gonna have the next speaker on weather, and then we'll take a break, so just give you an idea.
Good morning, everybody. Morning. All right. I'm Frank Garland. To the gentleman's question, I actually came out here from New York, home of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And knowing what I know about living in New York and those two, I don't think either one of them is going to be that friendly, but I'm just saying. All right, that's a joke. I'm just kidding. I don't know the difference. I'm not getting political on you. But yeah, so I came out from New York City. Actually, I live in Montclair, New Jersey. How many of y'all been to New York? Anybody? A couple back here, over here. How many of y'all want to go back? Nothing? Yeah, that was it? All right, you got it. So, but I actually am a Midwest guy at heart. I actually grew up in Rockford, Illinois, not too far from here. And my wife actually grew up on a small cattle farm down in Tennessee. And I grew up, as I was growing up, our family owned a farm out in western Kansas, actually for about 100 years. So the theory here is that I got a little bit of knowledge about agriculture that hopefully can make my comments relevant. But I also worked for the Weather Channel for 17 years. And I've worked for Weather Trends for 3 years. So I got 20 years of weather and a little bit of agriculture, so hopefully I can give you some relevant comments today. So Weather Trends is an interesting company because it does something that is highly unusual. We actually forecast weather locally, accurately, 11 months ahead. That pause is your cue to laugh. It's okay, because we know that sounds ridiculous. We get that. We understand that, and you might be thinking, well, maybe the guys at New Co-op have lost their minds, and maybe this is a comedy show. Maybe this is just all about just a big joke, but it's not. Weather Trends is that serious about what we do, and the story of how we do this, that sounds crazy, right, is an interesting one. It goes back 25 years. It's 1990. Iraq has invaded Kuwait. Bush 41 says this will not stand. Down in MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida, is General Norman Schwarzkopf. He's gearing up to lead the coalition forces to take back Kuwait. Also at MacDill Air Force in 1990 is a young lieutenant just out of college. He's out of Rutgers University. That's the State University of New Jersey, where I live. It also is in the Big Ten now. See a Hawkeye guy right here. And so young Bill Kirk is his name, Lieutenant Kirk. He's just out of college. He's stationed at MacDill Air Force Base. He has a degree in meteorology and math, and the general calls him into his office. Now, four-star generals do not call young lieutenants in their office for anything. So he's very nervous. He has no idea why in the world would this guy want to talk to him. He calls him into his office, and this is what he says. He says, Lieutenant Kirk, your predecessor was fired and in part responsible for some fatal F-16 accidents. I need a long-term forecast from MacDill Air Force Base and the Persian Gulf going out a year in advance. And don't change your mind once you give me that forecast. And don't tell me there's a 30% chance of thunderstorms in Florida during thunderstorm season. I could do that. I need an answer, not a hedge. Young Bill Kirk, standing before the general, thinks two things. One, I have no idea how I'm going to do that. That's impossible. He's been trained in the way all meteorologists are trained, in a physics-based forecasting system. Number two, he thinks, I am not in the mindset of telling General Norman Schwarzkopf that I can't do it. General Schwarzkopf dismisses him. As he leaves, he says, Lieutenant Kirk, you have access to the resources of the United States military. Figure this out. He goes away. He's got about 30 meteorologists. He's got a little bit of internet. And he's got a lot of calculators. And they sit down with this team of meteorologists and they think about how in the world they could do a forecast a year in advance and not be able to change it. They come back and deliver a forecast. That forecast works to the point where he does not get fired, and there are no F-16 fatal accidents. But now he's obsessed with this whole idea. And he spends the next 9 years in the Air Force working on this new way of forecasting. He also is doing that for the military as well as on his own. And through the 90s, he's gained access to more and more data because the internet is becoming more prolific and has more and more data. And that data is key to the forecasting system that they came up with. He leaves the military. He gets a sort of traditional meteorology job. He ends up hearing that Walmart is looking for somebody to help them with long-term forecasting. He goes down to Bentonville, Arkansas, meets them in their headquarters, shows them what he can do, and they hire him. Not as a employee, but as a contractor. And that's the start of the company that we now know as Weather Trends. That company has got corporate clients all across America, big ones. Anheuser-Busch, Coca-Cola, 3M, Nestle, Kohl's, Target, Citibank, JP Morgan, Unilever, Wrangler, Walgreens. The list goes on and on. I'm just giving you a small sample of who these people are. The list, if I put them all on there, they would be so small you couldn't see them all. And so that's where the company's been for the last, 15 or 13 years, serving corporate America with long-term 11-month ahead forecasting. Now, why do you suppose, as an example, Walmart would want to have a forecast 11 months ahead? Any thoughts on that? Why they would want that? Anything? Sorry? Yep, all right, good one. Logistics and sales trends. Every one of their products also, not all those answers are right, but every one of their products is ordered way in advance. Months ago, around September, October, they were ordering their products for the next summer. How many shorts? How many swimsuits? How many t-shirts? How many air conditioners? How many fans? How many lawnmowers? On and on down the line. They were ordering all of that, calling their suppliers in Asia, right? They also schedule all of their advertising. One of my jobs at the Weather Channel was to run advertising sales. We sold advertising to Walmart a year in advance. And that advertising would have to be scheduled and planned a year in advance. Actually, more than a year in advance on their part. When you get those Sunday supplements, we call them, or those inserts either in your mail or your newspaper, and it shows you what's on sale, that's actually planned 6 to 9 months, sometimes 10 months ahead. They're negotiating with each supplier, designing it, determining the pricing, working with the distributors, printing, all the logistics of that, and then it comes out to you 9 months later. What happens if they, so as an example, decide, okay, we're going to put lawn and garden equipment on sale in March. And it turns out March is very cold, like it was, I think it was last year. That's a disaster, right? That's a big waste of time because nobody's thinking about lawn and garden equipment when it's freezing or there's snow on the ground still. But if it happens to be a particularly warm March, that's the time you want to pinpoint that advertising. So these are the types of things they do. Anheuser-Busch determines all their production facility, all their production in terms of how much beer to produce, in which breweries, and where to ship it when, based on weather trends. Walmart sends us every single day their store sales for every single product. We send back to them the forecast for how much of every single product by store they will sell week by week going out 11 months. That's how sophisticated the system has become. So that's where the company's been, and so you have to ask yourself, okay, and obviously these people are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for this forecast. There must be something to it, right? If that's possible, then how do you do it? Right? Makes sense. All right. So fundamentally, we believe there are patterns in nature. We also know, or at least I get to talk to groups like yours all the time, is that a lot of you have the same sense. In your fields, year to year, you're thinking there must be some sort of pattern here, but I can't quite pick it up. And that's because, in part because, you're in your fields, but if you back up from those fields, you get a longer term forecast or look at the world, and you get more and more data, you start to see the patterns emerge. But fundamentally, we believe there are patterns in nature. And what Lieutenant Kirk knew when he was standing in front of Schwarzkopf was that the current model that every meteorologist is trained in, which is a physics-based model, doesn't work, right? You all have multiple apps on your phone, weather apps, right? And you look down, you're like, this is crazy. I got 3, 4, 5, 6 apps. They're all giving me a different forecast for the next couple of days, right? And so you're like, well, how is this possible? Well, because these are physics-based modeling, which is the best way to do it on a short-term basis. But the thing is that you've got multiple dimensions you're dealing with. Warm fronts, cold fronts, jet stream, topography, proximity to water, high pressure, low pressure. And this is happening all around the world. And all of that is affecting each other all across the world at different elevations. So this doesn't work. This is why you get frustrated. This breaks down after a couple of days. I worked with the Weather Channel for all those years. I worked with the meteorologists and said, can we get a 7-10 day forecast? They're like, no way, can't do it. So this doesn't work, and so we don't do this. We use math. Oops. I lost the slide. It's kind of doing something weird. All right, that's okay. We use math. We use probability, statistics, and correlations. And actually, I didn't lose it. Let me back up. This slide actually went forward. So here we are. So we use math, right? And we use as I said, probability, statistics, and correlations. All right. So, and we focus on the oceans and seas, because the globe is 70% water. And water doesn't change very fast. Currents and temperatures change, but at a much more predictable pattern. Up above the surface, there's all kinds of these dynamics of the physics going on, and it's very, very difficult to forecast. But because everything's crashing into each other. But below the surface is pretty calm. And so we're looking at those 70%, and we gathered the 125 years at a minimum of data from oceans and seas all across the world, and all the land masses, sometimes longer. You go here in the United States, going back to the Civil War, 150 years, and pulled that data all into a system and formulas that actually kick out these forecasts. Here's how this works. So this is an example. This is March and it's a 25-year. Come on, where'd it go? It's there. There it is. All right. So this is a 25 years, 1992 to 2015. This is the average high for the month of March in the city of Indianapolis. This is just an example, right? And this is 2012. Everybody remember that year? 2012? All right. So that was a very hot year, and it started out hot in March. And so actually what we know from a statistical point of view is that whenever March, these temperatures are 2 standard deviations above average, and it has always been followed by a colder than average March the next year. 100% of the time, going back 150 years, every single time. And so we predicted that the forecast would be somewhere in here. It would be cold the next March. Of course, at the time, everybody's like, okay, or the media's like, okay, global warming, this is the new normal, it's always going to be hot. No. It would be cold. It was. That's where we said it would be right here. It actually turned out to be the coldest. So I'm showing you this because, well, it's obvious, right? It's 100% of the time. That was not hard. But look, every time I get a big jump up, I get a good jump down. Up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. If I get a big enough jump, right? Big up, big down. A pattern. It keeps repeating itself. Look at this right here. I come down quite substantially. Pointer again. Come on, pointer. Can't find that. I gotta get up near the next to this thing. Come on, guy. There it is. Okay. So I come down, I go up a little, I go up a lot. I come down, I go up a little, I go up a lot. I come down, I go up a lot. Now we're looking at 150 years. We're saying, okay, how likely is that to happen again? How many times has it happened over 150 years? And we can do this for any day, any time period we want. And we actually look at the globe at 6.4 million locations. The globe to us is a 10 mile by 10 mile grid. Actually, we're getting that down to 5 mile by 5 mile. All right? And so we look at every location across the world, looking at the statistical probability of what's going to happen day by day, week by week, for precipitation and temperature. So that's where we start, and then we layer on 24 ocean cycles, ocean and sea cycles, because our Earth is 7% water. All right? So everybody knows this one right here, El Nino or La Nina, otherwise known as the Central Pacific Oscillation Index. All right? And so that is very influential, so it makes sense that you know that. But there are others. That's not the only one, okay? Because the oceans are big, right? There's the North Atlantic Oscillation, the Pacific North American Oscillation, the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, the Indian Nino. All right, I'm just giving you a sample of them. There's 24 of those. We layer on a little bit of solar too. All right, And then, because we're drawing correlations, I've seen many of these charts, you'll see on a lagging basis, what happens at the Indian Nino, and then we draw a correlation to see, does that affect, or does it have a pattern that follows between what happens in the Indian Nino, say 6, 9, 10 months in advance, versus what happens right here in Jefferson, Iowa. And we're doing this, crunching this data from all over the world, every location, and looking at those correlations and determining of the 24 cycles, which one is the most influential. Which one is the ones that are more influential get more weight in the formula. All right? And so we combine the statistical forecast with the cycles, and we come up with the actual outcome in terms of that forecast, right? By the way, oscillation, you guys are scientists, right? The oceans are not steady. That means they're moving. The currents and the temperatures are moving, all right? It's not the same. Also, multi-decadal, that means our decadal, those are decade patterns, or multi-decade patterns. Again, the oceans change slowly, but they do change. All right. By the way, also, El Nino, La Nina sort of kills me, because in the media you would think it was a switch going on and off. Oh, it's on, it's on, it's on and off. It doesn't work that way. It's a temperature and oscillation, okay? It's always something, and it's always moving. It's either getting warmer or colder all the time. And so we're looking at that all the time, along with every other one of these 24 cycles. So you can imagine there's just a massive amount of data here. Just ridiculous amount of data churning in our web servers where we're processing all this data coming out of these forecasts. All right, so we claim that we delivered 84% accurate. Now what that means is not like you think of accuracy today. You think of accuracy today, it's like, well, before the weatherman said that it was going to be 40 degrees on 3 days from now, it turned out to be 32 and that was wrong. Okay, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about capturing the trend. What direction are we going? Warmer, colder, and how much warmer, how much colder. All right? So let me explain how this works. All right, so this is a chart from, this is how to read a bunch of some charts I'm going to show you. But basically, this is a real chart, but